Welcome back, fanboys and fangirls. Today we're on topic, and today's topic is the king of the monsters himself, the big green Godzilla.
Ready? Pick it up now.
All right, there we go. Got myself a fresh cup of coffee, and I'm ready to kick this show off with a bang. Since you clicked on this podcast, you kind of already have an idea of what's going on. I find a topic in geek and or pop culture history and do a shit ton of research my ass off, and that's a lot of ass to research, and then I regurgitate it down your guys' throats like some kind of gigantic, disgusting mama bird. I hope you all enjoy what I've brought for you, because we are getting into the big green guy himself, Godzilla, the king of the monsters. Oh man, I've followed Godzilla my entire life, so doing this right now has gotten me really excited. Let's just say, to start things off, there are currently 33 Godzilla movies. Not all of them are considered canon, but there are 33 of them, and they've been being made since 1954. The first one being Gojira, made by Ishiro Honda and Tomoyuki Tanaka, who got the idea after the fishing ship, the Lucky Dragon 5, got caught in a little bit of the radiation field from an H-bomb test. And the crew of the ship ended up getting radiation poisoning and dying whenever they got back to shore. It was disgusting. The movie Godzilla, or Gojira, was made only 9 years after the nuclear bombs had landed in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So it wasn't exactly a long time since people had the, what's the word I'm looking for? Memories of their entire land being destroyed in front of their face. Something like that. The movie ended up using a style of filming that had an actor in a large rubber suit, which was 200 pounds and poorly ventilated, and low camera angles to make it seem like he was a lumbering gargantuan wading through his way through small model cities, fighting tiny plastic armies and eviscerating the landscape. Whenever the movie had been made, once it was licensed by America, they added an entire actor into the movie, played by Raymond Burr, who acted as an American reporter, talking about what was going on during the attacks. And it turned the movie from what was a horror movie into more of a popcorn munching blockbuster, I guess you could say. And it just started off this entire franchise of movies. Things you need to remember from the first movie are that the original Godzilla actually passed away from the experiment of Dr. Serizawa, the first bath bomb. And by first bath bomb, I mean the oxygen destroyer, a device that somehow just took all oxygen out of the area, turning Godzilla into a giant pile of bones at the bottom of Tokyo Bay. The second movie was actually just made a year later, called Godzilla Raids Again, but in America they had changed the name for some strange reason to uh, Gig- what is it? Gargantua the Fire Monster? Something like that. I don't know. It was weird. But the interesting thing it did bring us was the first paid acting gig for George Takei, who also then played in the first spin-off movie of the Godzilla franchise, Rodan. So in 3 years, I do believe, we got three Godzilla movies. Two of them are actually Godzilla movies. The third one is Rodan. And that started what I guess you could say is one of the first Universal movies, much like how the Universal monsters had their whole thing going on and how Marvel has its cinematic universe and how everyone has to have a cinematic universe. And conveniently, Godzilla once again has a cinematic universe with the King Kong movies. And that's something I'm actually going to be getting into a little bit later, which also coincidentally, 7 years later, after the Godzilla raids again, Godzilla is in color this time and is actually facing off against a familiar foe that we all might know, King Kong. Talk about the world being cyclical, secular. I think secular. I don't know. Words are weird and confuse me. But anyways, yeah, he fights against the renowned King Kong, and the entire tone of this movie gets brought up a lot. It's a lot more cheery. The colors are bright, and the message isn't as dark as the original movies seem to have been. Um, After that, we continue Godzilla's reign of movies. On top of the Godzilla movies that were being made, he sparked an entire genre of movie that it didn't not exist before, but it kind of was popularized by Godzilla. The giant monster movie started to take over the world with, movies like Them and The Blob being created. Um, Soon we see Mothra getting some love in Godzilla vs. Mothra. Then we have Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, and uh, Invasion of the Astro Monster, which starts a trend of every couple of Godzilla movies end up being a large mashup of a bunch of monsters coming together to beat up on King Ghidorah or another giant monster, usually just King Ghidorah because he's a gigantic douchebag with three heads from space that wants to destroy the Earth. He's also usually followed by a race of aliens called the Killiks, which is a totally original name, right? What I would say right now, though, that the most interesting thing about the Invasion of the Astro Monster is that it has a very familiar roster of monsters that we're going to be getting introduced to in this latest Godzilla movie coming out. As we see Mothra, Rodan, King Ghidorah, and Godzilla all duking it out on the screen, just like we're going to be seeing just next year in Godzilla, King of the Monsters. These Godzilla movies were starting to just get pumped out. They were easy to make because they would reuse a lot of the footage from previous movies and allowed people to just get their fix of giant monsters destroying cities and buildings and fighting each other with weird, oddly sophisticated martial arts moves that giant beasts probably should not be able to do. And then in 1967, Godzilla was made a daddy in Son of Godzilla. And then in 1968, the granddaddy of mega monster movies and massive endeavors that makes the Avengers Infinity War cast almost look small. I mean, physically, yes, he does make him look small. But comes Godzilla Destroy All Monsters as it wrecks into theaters. This introduces the trope of Monster Island and everyone wanting to just put all the monsters in the world on a single island instead of trying to figure out a way to just straight up destroy them, like sending them into a black hole. Oh wait, that didn't work. Godzilla's already tanked a black hole before. Anyway, this has it so that the Killiks come and they disrupt the Monster Island gates, and all the monsters in the world start just fighting King Ghidorah. Like I said, was going to happen earlier. Then we get the weird LSD-filled children's movie, Godzilla's Revenge, in which a child imagines himself becoming friends with Godzilla's son, who has a very derpy voice and actually talks in this movie, can grow and fight. And it has one of the dumbest Godzilla antagonists ever in Gabara, which his design is so weird. He's missing a tail. He should have a tail with how his body works. It bugs me. It has always bugged me. After that, we get one of the worst Godzilla movies of all time in Godzilla vs. Hedorah, the physical manifestation of human pollution, a giant flying sludge monster who also somehow made it so Godzilla can fly backwards while blowing his radioactive breath. It's really, really weird and makes no fucking sense. Uh, in an interview, the director of this movie also stated that Hedorah's eyes are modeled after vaginas, which brings a whole slew of weird questions about my childhood that I never really understood. Um, After that, we get a couple of fan events going on. One of them is for children to make a giant superhero to fight alongside Godzilla. So we got the character Jet Jaguar. Oh man, I loved that movie growing up. I actually wore out the tape so the VHS wouldn't work anymore. Children, for you who don't know, a VHS is kind of like a Blu-ray or a DVD, but big in a box, and it would go inside a VHS player, and we would have to manually rewind the videotape so we could rewatch it again. Dark, dark times. Yes, I know. Um, After that, we are introduced to one of Godzilla's greatest nemesises of all time, Mechagodzilla. What could beat Godzilla? Nothing but himself. Or maybe a giant alien-made mechanical monster modeled after him. And, well, that's when the Showa era ended. Um, in 21 years, we got Godzilla being a terrifying monster that represented Mother Nature striking back against humanity and the horrors of nuclear war to a giant monster fighting super dad. 20 years is a long time, isn't it? All things were quiet on the Eastern Front. Godzilla had gone into hibernation, and everyone thought that was the end. But a reboot was on the rise. Director Koji Hashimoto and special effect director Teruyoshi Nakano once again breathed life into the lumbering behemoth with The Return of Godzilla in 1985. And with this reboot came a complete redesign of the creature, giving him a much sleeker, more menacing look. And he got even bigger. The original Godzilla was standing at roughly 50 meters. Now he's standing at a whopping 80 meters. Uh, Wanting some more ideas from the series after the reboot, they decided to do another fan event, and they came up with a new monster by the name of Biolente, a giant rose infused with Godzilla's DNA and possibly the soul of a woman. It was really weird. And at the end of the movie, he went into space, never to be seen again. Totally never to be seen again. After that, King Ghidorah came back, and so did Mothra. Then Mothra got her own trilogy and the rebirth of Mothra. We once again see the return of Mechagodzilla, and then Godzilla's new nemesis comes into the picture. Being recreated by spores on a meteorite, we see Biolente reformed as Space Godzilla. Just like Godzilla, but bigger and made with gigantic crystals growing out of him. He comes down to Earth and kidnaps Godzilla's new son. And then Godzilla and him fight. We find out he has telekinesis. Things are weird. Godzilla comes back, beats him. And yeah, at this point, we realize that Godzilla is nothing but a shonen battle manga. I mean, think about it. The power levels just keep going up. He keeps fighting different versions of himself. The not as good made, but still just as strong Mechagodzilla, the bigger, better, badder version of himself, who's definitely a lot more evil. And then, well, the next monster that comes out is kind of the penultimate. In 1995, Godzilla ends up fighting what killed the original Godzilla, the Oxygen Destroyer. But it's a version of the Oxygen Destroyer that people tried to recreate, and things went wacky as the Oxygen Destroyer turned into dozens of little tiny crab monsters that started to form together into a gigantic behemoth with a lightsaber for a horn. It is named the Destroyer. Destroyer. Yeah, I know. Uncreative. But man, this guy was definitely the final boss in a manga. Facing the death of his past given form, Godzilla takes on Destroya while his body is going through full nuclear meltdown. And he ends up winning, but simultaneously he ends up dying, wading into the ocean and melting down. Uh, Humanity ends up freezing him a little bit, causing it so that he doesn't destroy the entire planet when he explodes. But we do then get to see his son become fully formed as a Godzilla creature and go off into the sunset, much like his father had before him. A true passing of the torch. And the end of the Heisei era, the second era of the Godzilla franchise. Couple of years passed, and in 1998, America's got its attempt at a Godzilla movie. And everyone loved it, said no one ever. The movie was made by TriStar Pictures and changed the Godzilla formula entirely. The only thing they kept is the fact that it was all created from a nuclear bomb testing. They made him so he was a giant iguana, he was more like a T-Rex, and he was also a she. He was a hermaphrodite that ended up being able to asexually reproduce. And he tried to take over New York and died by regular missiles on a bridge. It was terrible. Well, it was going to be a trilogy, but the only thing it got was an animated series, which was actually really amazing. Its trend for the trilogy got canceled, and later on, Toho actually bought the rights to the creature and renamed it just Zilla. People referred to him as Gino, though, Godzilla in name only. A year later, and being spurned by America's failed attempt at a movie, Japan decided to bring Godzilla back in Godzilla 2000, which was actually made in 1999, featuring a new monster, Origa, and a new design for Godzilla again. I don't know if he was any bigger. He might have been like 5 meters taller. But this monster was so boring, apparently, that he wasn't even good enough to put in any other Godzilla movies. And boy, did they have a really big one during this era. He came down to Earth and tried to absorb Godzilla and died in the process, blah, blah, blah. After that, we get one of the best-named Godzilla movies ever in Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, All-Out Monster Attack, where Godzilla is actually the villain, and King Ghidorah is the hero, as him and Mothra and Baragon all fight together to kill Godzilla, but just barely succeed with the help of humans, as all they leave at the bottom of the river is a beating heart, because nothing can really kill Godzilla, except for the oxygen destroyer. After that, we get Godzilla Final War, which was meant to be the end of the series. This movie was a massive way to end the Godzilla franchise too, with references to the Sentai Rangers, Kamen Rider, to the Matrix and Dragon Ball Z. There were aliens, there were mutants, there was cyborg giant monsters, there was transforming monsters that went from one form to another, much like how the villains in Dragon Ball Z would be like, "This isn't even my final form," and then spend an entire episode transforming to be actually smaller and less intimidating. He fights Kaiser Ghidorah, and simultaneously the main mutant in the series fights a alien, and he's like, "You're a 1 in a million mutation. You're like me. You're a Kaiser." And they both go Super Saiyan and fight each other like they were from the Matrix. It was super fun. It was really funny. And that was the end of, once again, the end of the Godzilla franchise in 2004. But America got a hair up its butt. In 2014, we are then introduced to the Legendary Pictures Godzilla, a full American reboot, much more close to the Japanese series, and it was actually a hit. And this sparked a new Godzilla renaissance because 2 years later, Shin Gojira was released, done by the creator of Neon Genesis Evangelion. The movie ended up being a way to cope with the Fukushima event that had happened just a couple of years beforehand, and was also a kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Commentary on the Japanese government and the way it would process the actual events of a giant monster attack. Uh, After that, Netflix got his hands on Godzilla and ended up creating the Godzilla movie, Godzilla Planet, one of the first, actually the first animated Godzilla movie. And a year later, this year, we just got the sequel to it, dropping maybe a week or two before this podcast. And it brings Godzilla and Mechagodzilla 200,000 years into the future, where the entire landscape has changed and humanity has come back to Earth trying to reclaim it. But this time, Godzilla is 300 meters tall, and Mechagodzilla is a city. And yeah, that's where we are currently in the Godzilla lore, with 33 movies and another one on the way. And by 2020, we're gonna have 35 movies, maybe 36, depending on how things go. But in 2020, we're getting Godzilla versus King Kong. Right now, though, we have Godzilla, King of the Monsters, which the trailer for just dropped, and it shows that Mothra, Rodan, King Ghidorah were all slowly just waking up, hidden underneath the Earth's crust as the progenitor titans of the world. And for some reason, we're the plague, or some shit like that. I don't know. It looks fun. It looks like it's going to be a blast to go watch, and hopefully I'm going to go see it like 5 times in theaters like I did with the 2014 Godzilla. Well, that was the entire history that I felt like going into, because there is a lot more than what I was talking about. I'm Kevin, once again, and you can find me on Instagram at Not Coffee. That's coffee with a K. You can find me on Twitter at KW Comics. If you enjoy our intro music, that's done by my friend Swa. You can find him on all social medias at Swa Music. If you want to be awesome, you can also follow the podcast on Instagram at Nerds on Topic and on Twitter as Nerds on Topic. And as always, remember, this is not the podcast you're looking for.